The second split of Season 2 has started. That means that our ranks have received a soft reset and the leaderboards have been wiped. Again, it is a soft reset, so it isn't exactly a fresh start. In case you don't know what a soft reset is, you basically are brought down a little lower than you were before from what I understand. For example, I was Diamond 1 at the end of the last split and I placed in Diamond 3 this split. So soft resets take away that lockout where you can only be placed at Diamond 5 or below. Now don't worry, you aren't guaranteed to place lower than you were before. Me and my duo partner went 10-0 in placements and she ended up placing in Plat 3 even though she was only Gold 1. So do your best in your placements if you haven't done them already. Now whether you're going to place or you've already placed and you're grinding up to where your desired rank is, here's the 1.3 drafting guide to help you out if you need it. I am going to be doing this one a little bit differently than the others. Before we get started though, I do want to say that this guide is made from higher tier experience, so it won't really line up with lower tiers. For example, a character like Tyra or Lex can be looked at as a top pick or ban, while in higher tiers, those two would rarely ever see the light of day. This guide is also made from PC experience, so it won't 100% line up with consoles. Now first, I'm going to talk about all the top tier picks. These are basically the undisputed best characters in the game. It doesn't matter what map it is or what kind of comp you're building or facing, these characters should always either be picked or banned right away. Tanks are the most important characters in this game, so Makoa and Khan are both leading this group. They've been the best two tanks in the game for some time now, so I don't really need to explain why they are where they are. Same with Cassie. Cassie's been the top damage in the game for a while as well, and still is despite her minor nerfs. Furia is one who I haven't talked about in one of these videos before. Furia proved herself to be broken after her release, and even after the nerf to her insane burst heal with Cherish, Furia is still the best support in the game. Furia's ability to apply a massive burst heal to a target with Cherish, with a personal barrier on top of that, is unmatched by any other support. Genos' tickle heals, despite going through walls, can't compare in the slightest, and Maldamba, while having more prominent heals, still can't compete with an instant burst. If a target is left uncauterized for even a split second, they can be instantly put back up to full. There's really no competing with that. The healing is just that strong. Her damage is good too, but you don't really see her doing that massive damage if her damagers are doing their job. Her stun is also very good since it does allow her to deal with flanks more easily than any other support. There's also her ultimate, which is basically a start winning or win more button. It's really good to initiate a fight with or guarantee a fight win if it's already in your favor. Solar Blessing is still a trap and it is inferior to Cherish, unless you're in a very coordinated environment, which public games are often not. Those four are your priority picks and bans in really any situation. If you're letting them go, then you're giving the enemy team a big advantage. Now we're moving on to the more situational picks. This is going to hold most of the roster. None of these picks are bad by any means, but many of them require certain situations to be viable, and I'll explain those. This is why I don't ever advise using tier lists. You cannot properly tier a roster if most of the roster is situational. Anara has been one of the really good tanks for a long time, but she always takes a backseat to whoever the top two are. While Anara can be used in a variety of situations, there are a few you have to be careful about. Khan limits a lot of Anara's kit and basically forces you into picking Mother's Grace, since he can very easily nullify her cripple. You also ideally want to pick her with a bursty main healer like Furia, Damba, or Ceres. Those healers make the most out of her sustain and bulk. Genos, while being really good with Luminary, doesn't make the most out of her sustain with his tickle heals. Fernando is also a very solid and well-rounded tank that can be picked really anywhere. His barrier is a very integral part of his kit though, so he's at his best when he doesn't have to deal with things that cancel out his barrier. Stuff like Khan's Commander's Grab, Terminus's Stun talent, Furious Stun, and Zin's ultimate can give Fernando a hard time. They shut down his barrier very easily, making up for the lack of Wrecker early in the game. Berrak, while not being the bulkiest tank out there, has a lot of self-sustain. He can heal himself with his turrets and give himself a massive personal barrier while also putting out some pretty impressive damage for a tank. He is all about locking down an area though, so be careful picking him into things that have good area control or area denial. AoE attacks and Tyra's fire can be rough on him, and things that can push in on him like a Nara or Makoa can also be threatening. Hair Trigger is a good pick when faced with those, so they can't push in on you freely. Any other time, Tinkering is the go-to. Terminus, thanks to his Power Siphon, is really good at being a nightmare for enemy DPSs since Wrecker has no effect on it. Things like entire Fire Spit salvos can be blocked with ease, saving you and your team from a lot of punishment. However, he is still a melee character, so he isn't ideal on maps with long sightlines or big open areas. Ashen Ruckus are both really close to being put in the never pick this ever category, but they still have uses that can be helpful. Ashe has the best poke out of all of the tanks, by far thanks to her slug talent. On maps with long sightlines, she can be very helpful with dealing with those long distance DPSs. I also do find some power in her AoE and COD spread. On those maps where enemies are constantly grouped up, both of those things can feel pretty impactful. However, if you want AoE, then you're not running slug, so you're either running Rally here or Battering Ram. You can only really run those two if the enemy doesn't have ways to stop your charge or pull you out of your ultimate. If they do, and Slug isn't good for the map, it's best not to pick her, which does end up being pretty often. As for Ruckus, his DR and HP nerfs made it so he can't tank punishment as easily. I feel many have struggled with this because now he has to be played more safely, since he can be bursted down more easily. Shaolin and Strix both punish him heavily from range, while BK and Drogos both punish him heavily up close. Also, on the odd chance they have a burn monster Tyra on a close quarters map, you're not going to be having a very fun time at all either. Now, I put Shaolin here only because of his FPS bug. When drawing his bow, he can drop FPS. I don't think this affects console, and if you don't get it on PC, it's probably because you're capped at 60 FPS, or your monitor doesn't display more than 60 FPS. Whatever the reason, if you don't have to deal with the FPS drops on him, then I put him right up there with Cassie. They're both relatively easy, very strong, and can be used in any situation. If you do get the FPS bug, then it's really on you. FPS drops can definitely affect how well somebody performs, so it's your gamble to take. Leon is the most well-rounded hitscan character in the game, but what gives her that oomph is her Def and Taxes talent. That early game cauterize can be a big advantage against team comps with a lot of sustain. Like a Nara with a strong bursty healer, a bulk up Buck, a Khan, stuff like that. If an enemy team has a lot of sustain potential, Leon can be used to deal with that early while also being able to build Wrecker on top of the cauterize. Against comps with low sustain like a Genos healer, you don't really need Leon unless you need her hit scan to deal with something, and you don't really need to use Def and Taxes in those cases. You could go with Eminence or Precision. Now both of the snipers, Kinessa and Strix, are both basically in the same boat. They have received scope nerfs, but they're both still good. You can play them both on any map besides Jaguar Falls or Brightmarsh. They both have their own pluses. Kinessa has mobility and the ability to one-hit to the head on squishies, while Strix has no charge up, invisibility, and constant wall hacks. Out of the two, Strix is the better one, and you rarely ever want to use Kinessa over him. The constant wall hacks from unauthorized use and the consistent 1200 burst is really good, and Strix is really a sleeper pick in the meta right now. Many don't understand just how strong he really is. They both also deal with a very strong character right now very well, better than any other characters, and that's Drogos. On maps with long sightlines like Timbermill or Frozen Guard, these two can be used as viable bans. Now speaking of Drogos, he did get a nerf to Fusillade, but he is still very strong. Fusillade can still be very strong for bursting down tanks, and it can still 2-tap any squishy with 2100 health or lower. Combustible has also risen back up. It's very good at displacing enemies while getting some pretty massive damage on them as well. A Drogo's firing off combustible fire spits can be very aggravating and detrimental to any enemy team. On Jaguar Falls and Brightmarsh, you can even use Drogos as a viable ban, since he thrives on those maps. The 2 snipers are awful on those maps, and even his other counters can have difficulty dealing with him on them. Bomb King is still as powerful as he's ever been. He has a higher skill requirement than most of the damage class, but if you have the skill required, he can be a very destructive force. He's very good in most instances, except on maps with long sightlines with a lot of long distance enemies on it. Due to the nature of his bombs, he can be poked out very easily on those kinds of maps. Anywhere else, and he's a great pick. Willow is somebody we've seen rise up in the PPL quite considerably. In the PPL, Willow is looked at as a must pick, must ban. I'm gonna be completely honest here with you guys though. Willow is very overrated. Her pick rate in the PPL honestly looks like a trend. Willow was picked up, it did well, and nearly everyone started doing the same thing. Willow hasn't received any kind of buffs to warrant this uprising. Her Dead Zone and Nightshade talent are very strong, yes, but everything else about her is not. Willow is still only a budget Cassie. If you're fighting something like an Inara with strong bursty healers, then I can 100% agree with picking up Willow, because Inara's Earthen Guard can't lower the healing reduction on Dead Zone. Outside of that, Leon is the better early game anti-heal choice. Moving on to Victor, I also think Victor is a very underrated pick. Not as underrated as Strix, no, but his shrapnel talent is insane on maps that force the enemy team to be clumped up together. Maps like Jaguar Falls and Frog Isle come to mind here. His mix of powerful AoE burst and consistent direct damage can be very impactful on maps like that. We all know why Genos is good, nothing to explain there. Just keep in mind that his heals are pretty minor, so if you need a team that really needs a lot of strong healing, don't pick Genos. He's best with comps that can sustain themselves a bit, since his main thing is his damage boost. Also, if Furia is up, don't pick Genos. If Furia isn't up and you need those strong heals, go with Damba. Now pretty much when it comes to Damba, again, pick him if you need those strong heals, but don't pick him over Furia. Now Ceres is really only worth picking if Furia is gone, and you need strong heals but can't play Damba. You're better off with Ceres if you can't play Damba. This is why I always advise never pressuring somebody onto Damba if they want to go Ceres. Pip is still mainly used if you need a pseudo blaster. There's no point in healing with him with all these strong options right now. Also, it's best not to pick him into snipers. They abuse his big crit hitbox. Now guys, I'm going to be completely honest about flanks here. Flanks are hard. Flanks have all been nerfed so much, and all of the things that just burst them down really hasn't. Not to mention, Furia is the best support right now, and Furia can take on really any flank in a 1v1 fight. Like, they aren't bad per se, but until all the easy burst goes away, they're a bit of a struggle. Buck, despite his nerfs, is still the best one, but he isn't really ban-worthy anymore. Xin and Maeve are still pretty okay too. Evie is alright, but her main thing is being annoying, and she is kinda inconsistent and buggy. Andro is only really any good if you're a god at him. Callus and Lex are really only good on maps with no verticality, but even then the others are better, so why pick them? I don't want to put any of these characters in the never use this category, but picking them really depends on how good you are and if you're not dealing with things that can instantly delete you if you see them coming, which in this meta is pretty rare. Now let's talk about the characters you should never really pick no matter what. Ying, Grover, and Tyra are only here because they are outclassed by several other options, so there's never really going to be a reason to pick them. They aren't bad themselves, just outclassed. However, Torvald, Vivian, Grok, Mowgli, and Sky are not worth picking at all. These characters are throws for either being too weak, having next to no real usefulness, or being extremely easy to deal with. I know a lot of you are probably looking at your screen right now in awe because I'm saying Mowgli sucks, but it's true. Outside of the lower tiers, Moji is one of the easiest things to deal with in the game, especially in this meta with all the crazy burst. Now the only other character I haven't talked about is Koga, but Koga isn't available to be played in competitive until update 1.4, so that's when I'll be talking about it. Koga is on the level of Eevee and Andro when it comes to skill requirements and skill caps, so he takes a while to master. I want to take as much time with him as I can before I start talking about him. I'm actively playing him to see what he's really capable of. Anyway, that's pretty much it, guys. I want to thank you all for watching. I very much appreciate it, and I'm going to see you guys later. Bye!